Well, hello, America. The president visited Ground Zero today. It's always a pleasure to have him and his motorcade in New York. Traffic is snarled again, but at least he's not here just for political reasons, or is he? It was the first time that he has been to Ground Zero since the 2008 presidential campaign, when he, as a candidate, stood alongside Senator John McCain. Obama invited President Bush to join him here today. Bush declined, said no, he'd like to stay out of the spotlight. Obama then invited President Clinton to join him, and Clinton declined. Clinton, there are cameras. And he said, I've got a scheduling conflict. Really? Really? So why would someone who just said we shouldn't be spiking the ball, spike the ball? Even Bill Clinton isn't going, and that should tell you something. Tonight, I want to talk to you about principle and why it is critical that you know who you are. You know what you believe, and you're able to clearly articulate those beliefs and defend those beliefs. I want to share an amazing quote with you tonight. And as we go through the hour, I want you to keep this in mind. Here it is. In a free republic, a great government is the product of great people. They will look to themselves rather than the government for success. The destiny, the greatness of America lies around the hearthstone. If thrift and industry are taught there, and the example of self-sacrifice appears, if honor abide there, and high ideals, if the building of fortune be subordinate to the building of character, America will live in security, rejoicing in abundant prosperity and good government at home, and in peace, respect, and confidence abroad. If these virtues be absent, there is no power that can supply these blessings. Look well to the hearthstone. Therein all hope for America lies. That was Calvin Coolidge. So what are the principles of the hearthstone again? There they are. Thrift, industry, self-sacrifice, honor. Hearthstone, what's being taught around the fire? What's being taught to our children? Wait until you see what's being taught to our children on tomorrow's episode. The question is, do you believe this? That America will be fine if these things are being taught? If so, guess what? You're soon going to be forced to explain and even defend these things, because America's momentum is shifting towards those who believe that there is a power that can supply these blessings, and it has nothing to do with this. It's been quite an amazing week here, beginning with the news from late Sunday, the death of UBL. It's probably, I think, the biggest psychological boost to America maybe since the death of Hitler, maybe. Bigger than the capture of Saddam Hussein, the most possible significant death since the 1940s. President Obama gave the green light for this operation, and therefore he is getting the credit deserved to him for the role he played in taking out UBL. But now, let me ask you, have you seen the ratings? Have you seen the poll numbers? How has this payoff been for him? Well, anywhere from flat to about 11 points. New York CBS Times poll is 11 points. That's the highest it gets. Quinnipiac survey shows a 6-point bump. Rasmussen shows 2, which is basically flat. So the best case scenario here is 11%, and that's from CBS News and the New York Times. More likely, it's somewhere in between. That's all the bump a president gets for taking out the world's #1 most wanted terrorist. That he should be up 25 points, don't you think? George W. Bush, I mean, I give him credit for it. He did the job. George W. Bush was in the low 90s after 9/11, but that was different. George H.W. Bush is probably a better comparison. After the Gulf War, it was 89%. Kennedy hit 83% after the Bay of Pigs invasion, and that one didn't go well. 11 points at the high point. Obama had a huge success and no poll spike. I contend that 11 is going to be the highest he will see by far. Getting UBL, I believe, will actually hurt him in the long run. Now, I know that's quite a statement here, but here's why. Because it's going to fall apart. People know something's wrong, and it has to do with principles. What are your principles? What is it that you believe in? Now, do you live your life by those principles? What are the president's principles? I don't know. Do you? Do our allies? They're getting harder and harder to tell. First of all, I don't know if you know this or if you've noticed, but the president is really never there at the fight. I mean, this is the first fight that President Obama has showed up to. Well, you could say, what about health care? Sure, health care was driven by Nancy Pelosi and Harry Reid. Did you notice that? They did all the heavy lifting on that. Meanwhile, Obama was supposed to be vacationing in Hawaii, but he postponed his trip until the Senate passed it. But he really wasn't on the front lines. Libya, another current example. When we launched all those missiles, he was in beautiful Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, while we were launching missiles into the streets of Libya. He was absent. This is actually the first time that I can recall that he put it all on the line. He was there. And while I realize, you know, it's not easy, as far as presidential decisions go, this shouldn't have been that difficult. But it took this president 16 hours to decide. Remember, back in August, they knew where UBL was. In February, they said, all right, we're going to try to capture or kill him, right? He said yes. This last week, they found out, we're ready to go, Mr. President. It took him 16 hours to decide. I mean, what did he do? I mean, that's a really pretty easy question, isn't it? I mean, I got to get a nap in. I got to get on my jammies and a blanket and a sippy cup. What are you doing? 16 hours? He could have gotten 2 full nights sleep. 16 hours. Put this in perspective. The World Trade Center hijackers boarded their planes in Boston around 6 a.m. By 9:03, both planes had hit the 2 towers. That's 3 hours to accomplish the job. It took the President of the United States more than 5 times this time to make that call. Why 16 hours? This is why I believe the poll numbers will fall apart and why it took him 16 hours. Because I think he got all tripped up in his own mind because he was contradicting every bit of foreign policy, everything he's ever advocated. It confirmed everything that he said doesn't work. It actually did work. He ended up doing the right thing in the end, but he did so against everything he has publicly advocated for or against, and sometimes those have switched places. He's against waterboarding, right? Here it is.
I believe that waterboarding was torture. And I think that whatever legal rationales were used, it was a mistake.
Okay, it was a mistake, yet it was the waterboarding of the Harry Beck guy that provided the intel that led to UBL's doorstep. So that he must have been conflicted. There's probably 20 minutes on that one. Jeez, man, was I wrong on this one? Now, he's also been calling for the closing down of Gitmo. But without the information from the detainees, we'd be nowhere. He wanted all the al-Qaeda leaders tried in civilian courts. His administration is more harshly investigating criminally CIA officers who interrogated al-Qaeda leaders than perhaps the al-Qaeda leaders themselves. He wants them tried to show off our criminal justice system, but this one he just says go in and kill him. I mean, okay, there's at least, there's probably 4 hours of that one. He said we had no reason to be in Iraq. He's on the record. No reason to be in Iraq. They have no ties to al-Qaeda. Unfortunately, the guy who led to the capture of UBL was captured in Iraq. So maybe there was al-Qaeda, there were ties, what? Now you take to the UBL photos. This one really bothers me. He will not release them now because he's worried it might inflame the enemy. Okay, good. So we don't want to make things worse for our troops. However, in 2009, he pushed for the release of the 2,000 pictures from Abu Ghraib. Finally, he didn't do it because the Pentagon said, are you crazy? It's going to get our troops killed. He says he doesn't want to inflame the Muslims. And that we should all know that Muslims cannot be terrorists. Well, Mr. President, why give the most wanted terrorist a proper Muslim burial? Isn't that a burial? Isn't that offensive to Muslims? Because if Muslims can't be terrorists, why would you give Osama bin Laden a Muslim burial? That doesn't make sense. There's another hour of lost sleep. So now he's not going to release any of those photos of bin Laden, because he's said now that he doesn't want to spike the football or pass out any trophies. Okay. But on the same week that he says that, he gives our enemies trophies, allowing the pictures of American troops, the flag-draped coffins, to be published. That just happened, what, today or yesterday? I'm confused, Mr. President. I don't even know what the hell. Who are you? I thought you were against that stuff and for some of the other stuff. Is this part of the change? You keep changing your mind? Change was never defined. And I don't think he's ever been defined in his own head. I'm sure you've heard the jokes about President Obama being the Manchurian candidate, and those dopes now on TV are like, he had brain surgery. What did they replace his brain? Is that what they did now? He's not the Manchurian candidate. However, he may be the manufactured candidate. On the campaign trail, the press manufactured every image of him. They eagerly labeled this man as JFK. There it is. Then when that one kind of didn't work, they labeled him as Abraham Lincoln. He's also been compared to FDR, and the latest is Ronald Reagan. I mean, I've seen the changes in the War Department. I mean, he's really looking more like George W. Bush, because he keeps just appointing all the same people that Bush did. So maybe he's Bush. No, he's Barack Obama. But who is Barack Obama? Can you really tell? His stance on Israel. On one hand, he says they have the right to exist. And then, on the other hand, he praises the people in Egypt and helps them out who are vowing to wipe Israel off the map. Right. He wants to sit down with Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, yet he'll barely sit down with Benjamin Netanyahu. Try this one on for size. Every year, a message goes out to the Iranian people for the new year. In 2009, here's the face of Barack Obama, all nicey nice. Watch.
For nearly 3 decades, relations between our nations have been strained. But at this holiday, we are reminded of the common humanity that binds us together. So on the occasion of your new year, I want you, the people and leaders of Iran, to understand the future that we seek. It's a future with renewed exchanges among our people and greater opportunities for partnership and commerce.
Wow, we want to do trade with these people because we have a lot in common. 2 years later, the same president. No more happy talk.
For nearly 2 years, there's been a campaign of intimidation and abuse. Young and old, men and women, rich and poor, the Iranian people have been persecuted. Hundreds of prisoners of conscience are in jail. The innocent have gone missing. Journalists have been silenced. Women tortured. Children sentenced to death.
Is that only 2 years, Mr. President? Which is it? Do we still want to do trade with them? I mean, do you believe they're super nicey nice, or they're torturing women and children? Do we publicly scold them, or do we trade with them? I don't know. Now he's off to ground zero to take a victory lap. I mean, I find this extraordinarily offensive. Very offensive. But this is really, I guess, maybe for the families to decide. No, it's not. This is a national tragedy. The president said he didn't want to spike the football, but I think this is like pinning a medal on himself and taking a victory lap around Arlington Cemetery. It's despicable. But I think the American people will see through this. Thomas Jefferson said, trust the people. They'll figure it out. They may make a mistake, but they will figure it out. It wasn't long ago that he unnecessarily, strangely, stuck his neck out to defend a questionable Muslim community center across the street from Ground Zero. Do you remember?
As a citizen and as president, I believe that Muslims have the right to practice their religion as everyone else in this country. And that includes the right to build a place of worship in a community center on private property in Lower Manhattan.
is bizarre. The Cordoba house, possibly with terrorist ties. Cordoba, by the way, is a word that signifies the beginning of Islamic rule in Spain. And now, all of a sudden, for the first time since he's president, he's there at ground zero. Then there's this. 2009, President Obama promised to cut the deficit in half by the end of his first term, 2009.
That's why today I'm pledging to cut the deficit we inherited by half by the end of my first term in office.
Wow.
To cut our deficit in half by the end of my first term.
Holy cow.
Even under the most pessimistic estimates. All told, by the end of my first term, we will cut the deficit in half.
Whoa. Wow. But in his first 19 months, he added more debt than all of the presidents from Washington to Reagan combined. And now the Fed says the debt ceiling needs to be raised another $2 trillion because we just keep spending money. You can only get away with this stuff if you are ignorant or uninformed. That's the kind of audience that will buy this kind of stuff. And lucky for the enemies of our country and those who want to destroy America, we do see through it, right? Some do. Our 8th graders now, though, don't even know what the Bill of Rights are because of what's being taught in school. Teens flocked to the internet to ask, who is Osama bin Laden? How do they not know? Well, they don't talk about 9/11 once a year in school the way that they probably should. I mean, do they mention the guy who did it? Guy probably still at large. Should we mention that? No, probably not. Because this president made 9/11 not a day of remembrance, but, quote, a national day of service and remembrance. We put service in front of remembering. Those kids that were Googling bin Laden don't know also about 9/11 because we sheltered our kids. We're afraid to show them what happened. It'll be too traumatizing. You know what? You fall down and go, ow, and you get a boo-boo from time to time. Boo-boos hurt. This was a very, 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 very big boo-boo. But we should let our kids understand. We can't even show the towers falling. I can't show them on this network, and I couldn't show them on CNN. Why? Too traumatizing to show the towers coming down. Quite honestly, they should be shown at least every September 11th. They should be shown maybe every day, because we're forgetting. Things will get very ugly if we don't know who we are. And whether it's through laziness or apathy, agenda, or whatever, we are losing that knowledge. That's why it is critical that you are able to articulate what we are and who you are and keep it alive. The president himself cannot define himself, and because the government is such a huge part of our lives in this country now, he can't define himself, so we can't define our nation, and neither can our allies, whichever ones we have left. Let me ask you a question. Are we a capitalist nation anymore? Have you seen the Fortune 500 list and who's on there? I love this. You got GE, GM, and Fannie Mae on the top 10. Fannie Mae, excuse me? All of these guys are in bed with government, taking bailouts, or they are the government. What are we? Are we a capitalist country? I don't think anybody knows. And that's the problem. We're doomed if we can't define ourselves. Let's look at some of the topics here that we've covered. Israel, he loves Israel, but I got to distance myself from them. Iran, we love Iran, but there's no real action here. Waterboarding, it doesn't work, but we use the info proving that it does work. Capitalism, he loves it, but he dismantles it. Debt, against it, but spends more than any other president in history. Hello? Here's reality. Israel. They're our friend. Iran. Love? No. Enemy. Waterboarding. Sucks, but it works. You want to debate? You can't debate anymore if it works. We know it works. Now, should we do it? That's up for the American people. Capitalism. Do I even need to answer? Hello? You know what, let me tell you something. When it comes to GM, get out of the car business, America. And if you're going to get into a car business, what do you say we get in with Honda? What are they going to do? A Chevy Volt doesn't work. Are we going to keep spending money until they come up with a Chevy Spark? Debt. He's against it. But he's spending. Cut spending. Stop it. The president wants our identity to come from government, from the collective. It must come from the individual. It must come from shared values and principles. Know them, share them, debate them, or lose them. We have to know who our friends and who our enemies are. The youthful revolutions in Egypt, the Middle East. Everybody was cheerleader. Commentators and the president, everyone across the board applauded the largely peaceful democratic revolutions. And now we have the Palestinian president and leader of Hamas meeting yesterday to sign the Fatah-Hamas Accords. Looks like they've kissed and made up here. The agreement was signed in Cairo, and with it came a stern warning to Israel from Mahmoud Abbas. Quote, "We reject blackmail, and it is no longer possible for us to accept the occupation of the Palestinian land." Then Syria. The Syrian-based head of Hamas said, quote, "The common national goal is to establish a Palestinian state with Jerusalem as the capital, without settlements and without giving up a single inch of it. And the right of return." Oh, this is going to be a good summer, isn't it? Is this the democracy we were all for? Because, again, I'm confused. We're not bombing in Syria, but we are bombing in Libya. Why? Where are our principles? What are our principles? And where's the press? Why are they ignoring it? Just like they're ignoring everything else. The Lara Logan story, CBS ran, and networks stayed off of this immediately because it was in her best interest. People felt horrible about what had happened, and nobody wanted to make a whole scene out of it, but now she did. She did. The freedom, peaceful, loving people in the crowd that everybody cheered. Last Sunday on 60 Minutes, she told her story. If you have small children watching, this one you must turn television off for. Have them leave the room or turn it off and come watch it later. Because Logan's account of what happened to her in that crowd on that day that Egypt was freed is graphic.
Before I even know what's happening, I feel hands grabbing my breasts, grabbing my crotch, grabbing me from behind. I mean, it's not, you know, one person and then it stops. It's like one person and another person and another person. And I'm screaming, thinking, if I scream, if they know, they're going to stop. You know, someone's going to stop them, or they're going to stop themselves because this is wrong. And it was the opposite. The more I screamed, it turned them into a frenzy. And I feel them tearing at my clothing. I think my sweater was torn off completely. My shirt was around my neck. I felt the moment that my bra tore. They tore the metal clips of my bra. When my clothes gave way, I remember looking up and seeing them taking pictures with their cell phones. I didn't even know that they were beating me with flagpoles and sticks and things, because I couldn't even feel that, because I think of the sexual assault was all I could feel, was their hands raping me over and over and over again. I thought that was the end. It was like all the adrenaline left my body. They were trying to tear off chunks of my scalp. And not trying to pull out my hair, holding big wads of it, literally trying to tear my scalp off my skull. And my next thought was, I can't believe I just let them kill me. That was as much fight as I had, that I just gave in.
This is what democracy looks like. Why isn't the media all over this? I mean, she's one of their own. And it's now being ignored. Evil, is being ignored repeatedly. There's something else the media is missing. A week after this happened, the 9th most powerful Muslim in the world, Yusuf al-Qaradawi, the Muslim Brotherhood's spiritual leader, was speaking in the very same spot. And the crowd was chanting, "Death to Israel, death to Israel." A dark, dark period is coming in the Middle East and perhaps the globe. And the sentiment is spreading here in America. I don't understand it. Here it's quite easy to see evil and good. I don't understand how it's being ignored. But I can understand now why no one in the world can figure out what America's principles are anymore. You know, in America, you have a right to say stupid things, and that is the principle that allows for the existence of MSNBC. However, whether we happen to agree or not, I support everyone's right for free speech. Never have I said someone should be silenced. It is when people, however, start acting stupidly to go along with it that they shouldn't be silenced, but now the problems start creeping up. I want to show you the scene in Tucson earlier this week. It is pretty frightening stuff. Here it is. The SWAT team is coming in, right? It was the aftermath of a disaster. Or maybe it was a crime in action. Or worse, maybe it was just a victory for a nearby sports franchise, huh? No. These police officers were forced to restore order at a local school board meeting. If you remember, I told you the story last week after a Tucson school board meeting got a little out of hand before it ever got underway. The school officials had the nerve to suggest that teaching children to try to reclaim American land from Mexico is a kind of a questionable concept. Not, of course, questionable enough to cancel the class. No. Just questionable enough to make sure the class is an elective rather than mandatory. There is a legitimate question over whether this class is even legal. You see, Arizona has one of those crazy laws that public schools just can't promote the overthrow of the United States government or promote resentment towards a race or class of people, among other things. What hate mongers in Arizona. You remember when you were a kid and you got back from recess, only spend the rest of the afternoon learning how to overthrow the government? Oh man, those are the days. So what else is taught in this wonderful class? Well, I have some of the material here. It's really fantastic. I like the part about Thanksgiving. Thanksgiving is the day when the dominant white culture celebrates the beginning of genocide. Oh, those memories of turkey, stuffing, cranberry sauce, and Grandma talking about genocidal celebrations. Sorry. Yes, it is part of the upbringing of every gringo. But let's not forget the fantastic scholarly moments when kids are taught that Americans are currently taking over America through multiplication. Yes. How did students react to the extreme injustice of having to opt into this wonderful class? Watch. Rage. They actually chained themselves to school board members' desks, refusing to leave. The meeting was canceled, but some of the members snuck around to watch the chanting, which continued for an hour. So earlier this week, the school board tried to take up the discussion again. Surely those kids who are being taught to overthrow their government would behave this time, right? No, shockingly, no, not so much. The rage again. Riot police were called in to restore order. School board members had to be taken out of the classroom or the room until the room calmed down. And then, of course, the vote never could take place. You know, the chant from Wisconsin, "What does democracy look like? This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy looks like." Yes, it is. But you'll never guess who's involved in this spontaneous eruption. We'll show you more next. I just showed the outrage that erupted at a school board meeting in Tucson this week. Police in riot gear had to be called in because the teenagers were out of hand. Might look like a scene that the left would typically applaud as a spontaneous uprising. Right. Grassroots. It's grassroots community organizing, you know. But this time, even the liberals are concerned. Journalist Mike Shaw, who lives in Tucson, Arizona, talked to a woman who describes herself as a former community organizer and a Democrat. She is part of a nonpartisan group that was asked by the school board to look into this curriculum. She says this program has been hijacked by social justice and called the Mexican-American curriculum inflammatory. Now, one of the group's other members, a former teacher, described the type of teaching that is going on now in the class.
The same way of teaching that's being done in Nicaragua and other communist-controlled countries, it's Marxist-driven. It's all about opposition to capitalism. It's all about the class struggle, and it's all about looking through everything through the lens of race.
America got to wake up pretty quickly. The kids, you see, are protesting, and they're part of a youth group. Yeah, and they're being coached to act this way by a local professor.
He was in the back of the room handing out speeches to each of the children. They were being ordered, commanded, and they were being good soldiers. No one in the world could have convinced me that that was actually occurring until I saw it myself.
That lady is the one who is the Democrat, liberal, that actually agrees with social justice, that's saying, help. They're also getting support from local community organizers. Well, I want to show you this picture. I mean, let me show you the picture of the protest here. You recognize anybody in this one? Put the shadow, put it on. Whoa, who's that guy? Look familiar? Ward Churchill, you remember him? The former University of Colorado professor who was fired after his comments about 9/11, calling the innocent victims of 9/11 little Eichmanns. You remember, that eventually led mercifully to his firing. What on earth is he doing in Tucson? Probably looking for a job. Seems like teaching this sort of material would come quite naturally to him. Do you remember how upset people were just a few years ago when he was teaching in a college classroom? Now, imagine this guy is now rounding up little troops in high school. Where's the outrage? Where is it? In Tucson, people are now starting to split. People who have been friends for years aren't talking to each other. Read the curriculum. We'll make it available at glennbeck.com later today. You've got to see this stuff. The state, by the way, is expected to rule this month whether or not this program adheres to the law at all. I can save you some time. It doesn't. The school district stands to lose millions in state funding, which, of course, they should if they can't stop teaching kids to revolt against the government. I mean, it's really not that high of a standard to clear, is it? Wake up, America. Indoctrination is repeating itself over and over, not just in Arizona, but all around the country. And tomorrow night, I'll be talking to teachers from all around the country who have said they've had enough. They've had enough. Don't miss tomorrow's episode. A few years ago, I met a guy named Marcus Luttrell. I met him after I had been told over and over again about this book. He's the only guest I've ever had on my radio show that I asked back 3 days in a row. He told the story of this book on my radio program. It was the most amazing 3 hours, I think we did, of probably my broadcast career. And we became good friends, and I love him. He is the lone survivor. This is the story of SEAL Team 10. He was the eyewitness to Operation Red Wing. It is a story of courage and compassion. This Saturday, the Navy is christening its newest warship, the USS Michael Murphy. He was a member of SEAL Team 10 and good friends with Marcus. They went into Afghanistan after the World Trade Center bombing. They were some of the first people in Afghanistan, and what they were doing there is they were just trying to watch one guy. They were told, just watch him. Keep track of him. They were looking for one guy, and they were hiding. And it was their compassion that got 3 of the 4 killed. They had 100 Taliban fighters that they were around, and they were hiding, and a shepherd came over the hill and stood on this log. And one of them was hiding underneath the log, and he just kept thinking, don't look down, because they had to kill him if they were found. Just then, the shepherd's son stood up on top of that log as well. They looked down. The SEALs didn't kill the child. They just couldn't kill an innocent child, even though that's what they're ordered to do. If you get caught, you kill them, otherwise they're going to turn you in. Well, one of them said, we can't do it. And their compassion had them let these two go. Well, as soon as they got over the hill, they went right to the Taliban and ratted them out. And Lieutenant Murphy's courage and his compatriots, the courage that they all displayed, is the reason why his name is on this ship. My friend Marcus Luttrell and 2 of his other SEAL members were trapped in a ravine with Michael Murphy. And they could no longer get a signal out. And there were 2,500 Taliban now trapping them, and they're just shooting down. And they're dying one by one. And Lieutenant Murphy knew they had to call for help. The only way he could get a signal is if he went right out in the open. Everybody knew he was going to die. He knew he was going to die. But he went out and made the call. And the Taliban shot him. At one point, they shot him right in the center of the back, and he dropped the phone, and he reached down and picked it up and finished the call. He even said thank you at the end before he hung up. He died trying to save his friends. This is the most incredible story you will ever read, The Lone Survivor by Marcus Luttrell. I am proud to call Marcus my friend. He is the only surviving member of that team. I told this story on the air today in a little more detail. You can hear it if you go to glennbeck.com. But it's appropriate on a week where we are saluting the SEALs. How appropriate we salute Navy SEAL Michael Murphy. A ship named after him. But to me, it will always have a subtitle: Compassion and Courage.
Coming soon, the first ever Glenn Beck Quiz Show. Think you could answer questions about the stuff Glenn's covered over the last 2 years?
I talk about the dangers of big government, collective salvation, the Tides Foundation.
If so, we'd like to put you to the test. Who does Glenn call the spooky dude?
Spooky dude.
Who does Glenn hate?
Hate this guy.
Who does Glenn love?
I love him.
Show off your Beck IQ and write in for tickets at beckquizshow@foxnews.com.
Do you understand? This is a ridiculous show, but I'm glad you're here. Make sure you join us. That game show sounds actually like fun. I don't think I could do the last one. I don't know. Tiffany, am I going to be the... Are they playing against me?
They are going to be challenging you about your own show.
I don't even know. You might score better than me. I don't know. Tomorrow on this program, it is time for teachers to be heard. We've talked to students. We have talked to parents. But teachers, tomorrow, a full audience of teachers that are tired. And they are going to take on the indoctrination in their schools and unions. You will be surprised to learn these teachers don't want tenure. A lot of them don't even want unions either. They want to teach, but the system, they say, is preventing them from doing it. It's an hour that you must watch, and I urge you to watch with your kids. And then Thursday next week, we're going to fill our audience full of viewers who say they've been inspired in one way or another by this program. They took action in their communities or just in their own lives. And if you'd like to be a part of that audience show, send us your story along with your name and your town to GlennBeckTix, T-I-X, @gmail.com. Put inspired in the subject line and come on to New York. While you still can, you don't need a passport. We also want you to tell us some of the other shows that maybe you'd like us to do. Maybe we've missed some history on a subject and you'd like to hear more about it. We want your voice to be heard. Until tomorrow night from New York, good night, America.